Hello, hello. This is my artifact episode number 3757. Today's date is December 12, 2025. It's been almost like morning at 8:56 a.m. All right, all right. Let's just jump into the question. Let's go. All right. The question is, what if your shadow has a mind of its own? Oh my God. Okay, like basically these kind of like actually questions are like like I don't know, something like very unique in itself. Like I never really thought about this kind of like assembly question. It was literally just out of my world. I don't know how do I supposed to answer, but I try to give it that possible point of perspective. Whatever. Okay. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. When I try to think about that reality or when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my knowledge and information and experience that I've been through. And when I try to tell this thing, when I kind of like utilize those kind of like knowledge and information, I feel really good. I felt good. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. It's just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. Alright, yeah. Now regarding about the question says that what if your shadow has its own mind in its shadow has its own mind. Okay. Okay, let me give you the context. Okay, I am actually at the rooftop. It's morning at 8:58 a.m. I am kind of like a sitting in front of sun. Okay, yeah. So I'm kind of like a somebody getting lot of sun. Okay, yeah. But also I'm creating shadows. Okay, there is in front of me. There is exactly my shadow. Okay, I'm looking at my shadows right now. Now, question is that, okay, what if my shadow has its own mind? Then what would be that? Let's just kind of like a take a understand. Like the question doesn't really kind of like a clarify regarding about everything. Okay, so let me clarify. Okay, I'm kind of like a try to do a imaginary point of perspective. Okay, yeah. My shadow cannot able to be speak. Okay, yeah, but my shadow is existence. It exists. Okay, it exists and it replicate exactly what I'm doing. If I'm kind of like waving my hand, my shadow is also waving my hand too. Okay, yeah. So in somewhat something, it's kind of like me doing exactly things that I'm doing. Okay, yeah. Now if my shadow has its own mind, then probably he can do what he want to what he want kind of like a feels good. Okay, yeah. Feels good means like that example, like I'm kind of like a sitting here in front of the sun. Also other side it's creating shadows. Okay, yeah. So basically the existence of shadow is actually happen when you are sitting in front of the sun or some sort of light source or things like that. In the darkness, shadow might not be exist, probably, or it might be, because the darkness is kind of like a cover with the entire thing is a darkness. So probably there is no existence of shadow, or maybe there is a more existence of shadow. It's not, I'm not really sure about that. So I think that in the darkness the existence of shadow will be gone. Okay, yeah. So shadows always wants to be exist, because this is what we can't, this like we want to be, like basically we are human and we want to be exist. Okay, yeah. Same thing that shadows, because shadow has a mind and shadow kind of like a thing that key shadow wants to be exist. Okay, yeah. So basically a shadow always wants you to kind of like assembly be on some sort of light source. Okay, or sun or maybe light source or anyone. It does not let you go in kind of like a darkness or things like that, because of it kind of like a question of its existence probably. Okay, yeah. So it won't let you go into the darkness probably. Now the question is arise, why not kind of like a shadow is not letting you go to the darkness. Is because of the existence. Okay, yeah, because in the darkness you doesn't really create any shadows or things like that. Let's just say you are kind of like crossing a street and suddenly there is a kind of like a building. Okay, yeah. So overlapping the building shadows, like basically there is in front of the building, and you kind of like came inside, came under the shadow building. So probably your shadow might gonna say no, don't go there because my existence will gonna gone and things like that. So it kind of like simply let you force to go other side, but you wanted to go that way. So probably it kind of like pulling you backward, probably. Okay, yeah. This might be a cause. I'm just thinking about a creative mindset. Probably, I'm just kind of like thinking about the possible point of perspective. I'm not really sure was it gonna happen. Okay, yeah. But there is also another question actually arise. Okay, yeah. If I'm creating, if my shadow has its own mind, then probably there are like there are multiple things our shadows actually created. Let's just say in front of me there is a chair, there is a water tank, there is a kind of like a something object. It also creating the shadows too. So basically if my shadow has its own mind, then probably the chair has its creating own shadow. So does the shadow of the chair has its own mind or what? Okay, yeah, I'm not really sure about that. Okay, yeah, because it's okay. uh, Another thing is that na ki probably is this thing that ki during the darkness, okay, yeah, because there is no shadow at all, we would become very free. Okay, because there is no resistance at all. Because during the day we are kind of like assembly forced by shadow thing and stuff like that. It kind of like assembly not let you go in the kind of like things and that and that. But when the sunset, you are complete free. Okay, there is no string attached to your shadows and things like that. So but there is might be a kind of like a some sort of light source, but probably yeah, you could be a kind of like a little bit free as compared to the day. Okay, yeah. Uh, then uh, uh, then another thing is that key, I don't know, like basically if I'm thinking about all the possible point of perspective, then I'm not really sure how do I supposed to. Sorry about this gap. Suddenly I got call from somebody, but it's a really good thing. Okay, yeah. Why? Because of that key. During this particular period of time, I was kind of like thinking about that key. What would be the shadow? Would kind of like add something. Okay, yeah. So there is a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Okay, yeah. Now I'm kind of like thinking about all those creative approach because the question doesn't really at all. Okay, yeah. So the question actually says that ki, what if your shadow has its own mind? Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to create all the creative approach regarding about what my mind could kind of like somebody think about that possible point of perspective. Okay, yeah. Let's just say, okay, yeah, that ki your shadow is always with you, even if you are winner, if you are loser, if you who you are, shadow always be there. Okay, yeah. During the night, yeah, it will gonna gone, but during the day, it will gonna rise up again. Your shadow will knows you everything, your hard work, your effort, your laziness, your everything. If your shadow has its own mind, and if your shadow is kind of like a living with you 24/7, obviously during the night it gone, but during the day it will gonna arrive. It knows you, it will gonna understand you, it will gonna kind of like a simply push you to be more further. I'm not really sure how do I supposed to explain this thing. Okay, but it's kind of like a things that na ki, let's just say that ki there is a something with you. Okay, yeah, and that something has its own mind. Okay, yeah. So whenever you go, your shadow will be go there. Okay, yeah. And obviously if you don't want to live in kind of like a slum or anything, obviously your shadow don't want to be kind of like a live in slum and things like that. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing, you want it to be win, as well as your shadow always want to be win. And if your shadow has its own mind, yeah, it doesn't really talk, but kind of like somebody doing something for put the kind of like effort to win. I don't know how do I supposed to explain, but it kind of like things that na ki, your shadow is always kind of like somebody make sure you will win. You are kind of like somebody win at whatever the battle that you are fighting, regarding about living the life, regarding about money issues, regarding about everything. Okay, because this kind of like simply a particular set of mind is always with you. Okay, yeah. And it kind of like a simply, it kind of like a makes you better at something. Okay, yeah. Makes you kind of like a make you better life at something and things like that. At the beginning, yeah, it's kind of like a some bit inconvenience regarding about having your shadows and things, probably is this thing. But throughout the time, your shadow might gonna understand, and it kind of like a push you to be kind of like a be something much more better person and things like that. Okay, yeah. One thing. Okay, yeah. Shadow will not gonna let you do something very crazy thing. Now why not? Because is this thing na ki, as I mentioned, okay, yeah, if your mind, if your shadow has its own mind, that mind means kind of like a somebody doing something, judging between what's the right thing and what's the wrong thing. And that's what kind of like a somebody human makes us human. Okay, yeah, that's our kind of like a consciousness, that we kind of like understand what is actually right and what is really wrong. And also is this thing, we upgrade through what is actually right and what is actually wrong. Okay, upgrade means what? Okay, yeah. Killing people, is it right or wrong? Obviously wrong. Stealing money, right or wrong? Wrong. Okay, yeah. Now basically we have this kind of like a set of judgmental regarding about what is actually right and what is actually wrong. Obviously these are came from the experience and things and that and that. If shadow has its own mind, a shadow would kind of like simply determine what's actually right and what is actually wrong. Okay, yeah. So even if you wanted to kind of like do something wrong, shadow will not let you do this thing. Now why not? Is because of that ki, it's a kind of like a mindset, a kind of like a mindset with you, and it will kind of like a knows you what is actually right and wrong, and it will not gonna let you do something wrong. Okay, if you're not really understanding this example, okay, yeah, let's just say your wife. Okay, yeah. Now basically is this thing, your wife is always with you but not always with you. Okay, yeah, because like basically you have kind of like a different set of mindset, your wife has a different set of mindset. Obviously you spend a lot of time together but not every time. Okay, yeah. She has his own work, you have kind of like a own work and things like that. But what if kind of like imagine that your wife is kind of like a handcuff with you all the time. Whenever you go, even if you're bathroom, your wife is always be with you. Okay, yeah. So regarding about that point of perspective, na, like your wife has its own mind, and your wife is actually think about what is actually right and wrong thing. So even if you wanted to do something really wrong thing, your wife will not let you do this wrong thing, because your wife kind of like have mind and she also understand that what's actually right and wrong thing. And this kind of like the same thing happened, kind of like a imagine as your wife is kind of like a handcuff with you all the time. Okay, yeah. Now, yeah, you will. Okay, and another thing is that Naki, if you are kind of like a being really hard work and things like that, your wife is kind of like a somebody supports you. Kind of like a somebody is this thing that keep equivalent to your shadow has its own mind, then probably your shadow will kind of like a somebody support you in kind of like a things like that. Okay, so I'm kind of like a resonating this particular example with this particular set of mindset. Like basically imagine your wife is kind of like a somebody just handcuffed with you all the time. Then what exactly happened? Obviously at the beginning you will kind of like a somebody just annoyed and things like that, but after some sort of time she will gonna help you, because whenever you go your wife will gonna go too. Okay, yeah. uh it's not meant to be that ki probably is this thing you will gonna dictate. Okay, yeah. Sometimes your wife means your shadow also kind of like a do the things that she wanted to do, things wanted to kind of like a feel good. Like example is this thing that ki I'm kind of like a sitting here in the sun, and because of sun it kind of like a creating shadows. Okay, yeah. So basically existence of shadow is kind of like a depend on how much I time spend on kind of like a some sort of light and things like that. Now, like yeah, it's a winter, so probably I'm kind of like a feel really good to kind of like a sitting in front of the sun and kind of like a things like that. But what if there is a summer? I would not gonna sit in front of the sun, because boy, I'm belong to the India and heat is like a too much. 40 degrees Celsius is a kind of like a become normalized here and I cannot able to be stand in front of the sun, probably not. Okay, yeah. So there is a lot of ups and downs and things like that. I don't know, it's a kind of like a creative set of mindset regarding about your shadow would be kind of like a things like that, huh? One thing is that shadow will not gonna kind of like a simply let you go. Okay, shadow will not gonna run away. Shadow will always gonna stick with you. Shadow will kind of like a push you do something really different thing that you don't want to do, but kind of like a simply the shadow is actually doing it for their existence and things like that. Okay, yeah, your shadow is kind of like simply uplift you when you are kind of like a pushing through a lot of hard work and things like that. Also, shadow will kind of like simply not let you do kind of like a simply really wrong thing, because obviously shadow has its own mind and things like that. So yeah, this would be kind of like things. Like basically, I'm kind of like a resonating that what if your mind is actually handcuffed with you? It's kind of like a similar example would gonna happen. Okay, yeah, probably. So this is what I'm thinking about, that having a kind of like a shadow would be kind of like a do something things like that. Obviously, it's kind of like a simply really required very refined work to kind of like how is actually happen and things like that. All right, I should supposed to be end here. All right, so this is it, and thank you.